My name is Ray Bacigalupi, and I'm a marriage and family therapist in private practice in Sacramento. I belong to and support both Therapists for Social Responsibility and Physicians for Social Responsibility. I invite you along on my journey in and out of the war zone. The following events are graphic and true. It is the night of April the 16th, 1969. I'm having a nightmare of young children scattered around me. Crying children, screaming children, mutilated children, bloodied children, dead children. The smell is disturbing. Just before I'm completely overwhelmed, I wake up sweating and scream out loud. For a brief moment, I struggle to orient myself. Then slowly, the reasons I have this nightmare over and over again enter my consciousness. It is 1968, 1 year earlier. I'm a 21-year-old corporal in the United States Army stationed in Vietnam. I'm on the Lieutenant's Armored Personnel Carrier, also called a track. Our unit has been ordered to search an area of grass-covered, rolling hills that border a village because a spotter plane has reported that Viet Cong insurgents may be burying weapons in the area. Lieutenant orders 4 of the 7 tracks to check one area, while we check another. After a few minutes, we receive a call that there's a problem. One of the other track commanders spotted, in broad daylight, a person dressed in black who started running when the tracks approached. He says he fired a burst from his .50 caliber machine gun as a warning to stop. One of those warning rounds has blown the side of an 11-year-old girl's head off. The parents have come from the village and are visibly upset. My 20-year-old lieutenant tells the parents not to worry because the United States government will compensate them financially for the loss of their daughter. I cry quietly as we leave the area, having found neither weapons nor enemy soldiers. On another day, we are doing vehicle maintenance at our base camp when mortar rounds start exploding around us. The mortars are being fired from a graveyard at the end of a village. As we approach the graveyard, the infantry are fired upon, and a rocket takes out the track in front of mine. My track commander orders us to fire our machine guns at the houses located on either side of the track. I haven't seen or heard enemy fire from these homes, so I shoot between them. Infantry personnel are firing their weapons as well as other tracks. Soon, helicopter gunships arrive and open fire. That night, it is quiet, deadly quiet. The next morning, people who live in the village come out into the street. Several of the men are carrying what looks like a large blanket. In it, I can see 8 or 9 bloodied, mutilated, dead children. This time, I am devastated. I weep openly. On another routine day, an infantry unit has been pinned down and is suffering heavy casualties. We have been sent to rescue them. With the track's firepower, we win the battle quickly. Many infantry are wounded, and we start evacuating them to a nearby clearing where they can be taken by helicopter to a hospital. I help lift an 18-year-old male onto the track. When we arrive at the clearing, I help transfer him to a stretcher. When I return, I notice that parts of his brains are still on the floor of the track. I hope he dies quickly so that his family and him won't have to suffer more. By now, I have no tears. Then there are the intentional atrocities. I'm on guard duty close to a village, and it's a little after 2 a.m. All of a sudden, I hear explosions, people screaming, and animal noises. I prepare for an enemy attack until I realize other boys in my unit are bored and have decided to fire their grenade launchers to blow up the villagers, oxen, and pigs. These animals are the livelihood of the people in the village, and they can't subsist without them. Weeks later, after a fierce battle, my unit sergeant, an active alcoholic, blackmails a private who has fallen asleep the night before on guard duty. The sergeant wants a souvenir of the earlier battle and orders the private to take a machete and sever the head of a dead Viet Cong. When the head is delivered, the sergeant puts it in a pot of boiling water, stirring it with the stick to remove the blood, skin, and hair. The sergeant smiles into the camera as I take photographs in black and white. 3 weeks later, I'm approached by military police investigators who want any pictures or negatives that I have of the incident. I tell them I mailed them to my parents, and they threaten legal action if the evidence of the incident isn't turned over to them. They are trying to cover up what has happened, and they succeed. The U.S. military is just before dawn on another day. U.S. military spotters have given coordinates to an Army motor unit. They are wrong, dead wrong. 7 of our infantry are killed, 12 wounded, and 1 track is destroyed. It is just another accident. It is now the end of 1968. From my hospital bed, I learned my track was blowing up. I receive a Purple Heart due to combat injuries and an honorable discharge from the Army after serving 7 months in Vietnam. After arriving in the United States, I returned home by bus, alone, numb, and withdrawn. And then I was out of the war zone. Over the next 30 years, I started and ended a career in law enforcement, earned 2 master's degrees, marry a loving woman, parent 2 wonderful children, and get licensed as a marriage and family therapist. I follow the so-called American dream. I buy real estate, invest in the stock market, purchase cars, computers, and other consumer goods. I believe I'm being socially responsible by teaching parenting classes, offering counseling, and caring for my family. As a therapist, I learn skills, techniques, theories, and models. I learn interventions to help people gain awareness and take action to resolve their personal problems. I learn to ask important questions about abuse and other personal issues. But none of what I learn addresses the effect that politics has on individuals, couples, or families. In all those years, I failed to vote in elections or to be politically active. It is the end of the year 2000. There is a presidential election without a winner. I've been sleepwalking through 32 years of politics. I'm beginning to wake up. It is the year 2001. The events of September 11th changed the world. We are again a country moving towards war, not peace. The Patriot Act, with its chilling provisions, is passed overnight. I finally realized that politics, my profession, and my family are not separate and isolated entities. It is the year 2003. The war in Iraq against common sense, justification, and world opinion has begun. I've started having nightmares again, violent nightmares. Every time I see or hear about this war, I'm reminded of Vietnam. From the killing and maiming of innocent children, men and women, to the prison atrocities. From the destruction of homes, marketplaces, and the infrastructure for the necessities of life, to the exposure of our young men and women to toxic materials. From the lies and cover-ups to the arrogance and lack of regard for others. From the lack of support for the veterans when they return home to the disregard for worldwide demonstrations against the war. As a result, I join in the protests, and I'm compelled to write the following poem. Thank you, George W. Bush and the pro-war advocates. Up until now, I've been able to pretend that the world was different than it is. I was solidly entrenched in the myth of the American dream. I was able to invest in oil companies, manufacturing, or defense contractors. I was able to consume natural resources as though they were endless. I was able to change channels when humanitarian programs aired documentaries of children, women, and men dying of starvation, disease, and landmines. I was able to turn away from the homeless, the uninsured, the underfed within our own borders. I was able to sit by quietly while over 50% of our gross national product is spent on current military conflicts, debt from prior military engagements, and maintenance of the most powerful military ever created. I was able to ignore the destruction of worldwide ecosystems, corporate abuse and inhumanity, punitive wars on drug and poverty, and the use of religion to justify murder. Not anymore. George W. Bush has effectively, through his policies of arrogance, short-sightedness, greed, and thoughtlessness, poured ice water on me, slapped me in the face, violently shaken me awake. And the pro-war advocates have taught me a valuable lesson. Not long ago, I stood at a corner with others protesting the war in Iraq. People would give us a peace sign, a thumbs up thanking us. We would do the same, thanking them. But dispersed among the supporters were others. Many put up their middle fingers, others their thumbs down. Some yelled, "Get a job, get a life," or made other disparaging remarks. And what they reminded me is how difficult it is to be nonviolent, to be peaceful. I grew up little and afraid, hating bullies, and I spent a good deal of my life trying to be tough. There I was at a peace rally waiting, actually wanting one of those people to stop so I could beat them senseless. I was reminded by them how easy it is to be violent against others and how hard it is to use compassion, communication, and dialogue to resolve conflict. For years I've been unable to cry when I needed to. Now I can't stop. Again, I want to thank George W. Bush and the pro-war advocates for waking me up. It is now October the 16th, 2004. Nearly 1,100 U.S. military personnel dead. Over 10,000 Iraqi, many civilians dead. 5 times as many Americans and Iraqis have been wounded. Many American soldiers and Iraqi people are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's an increase in suicides within this population. Depleted uranium used in our ammunition, with its half-life of 4.5 billion years, is causing Iraqi people and our soldiers to have deformed babies. For those who have not been in a war zone, current events will not bring up past military traumas as it did for me, but it may bring up difficult feelings from old wounds, violations, and injustices. The violent images, inflammatory words, and divisiveness may affect us even if it does not trigger old pain. Observing the injuries or losses in other families, even though not directly, may still cause us to feel the victim's fear, pain, humiliation, and rage. Also, those struggling with the direction our country is taking may be feeling traumatized and need a safe place to share their concerns. They may be concerned when they learn about corporate abuse and ownership of our political system, violent enforcement of punitive drug laws, the concentration of the media in the hands of a few, the taking away of many of our basic rights through enforcement of the Patriot Act. They may also be concerned about how the vulnerable are treated by the powerful in this country and abroad, that there has been a lack of compelling action in regards to worldwide epidemics of AIDS, dysentery, genocide, starvation, and nuclear proliferation, that many CEOs are earning up to 530 times the average salary of the workers they employ, that California's governor just vetoed legislation to raise the minimum wage to just over $7 an hour, that 11 million of our American children are on some form of antidepressant. Something is wrong, seriously wrong, dead wrong. I've been confused about my role as a therapist, have questions about neutrality, the place for psychotherapy in the political realm, and the place of the political in the psychotherapy hour. I now believe that activism is called for both in and out of therapy. As a psychotherapist, I have some questions for myself as well as my colleagues. How can we ask about family abuse and not ask our clients how they are feeling about and dealing with the current political insanity, knowing what we know? How can we be silent when teenagers come into our offices and can't wait to join the military, knowing what we know? How can we justify maintaining a clear separation between psychotherapy and politics, knowing what we know? How can we remain neutral as therapists, knowing what we know? And finally, how can our continued silence be ethical, knowing what we know? Thank you for sharing my experience.